Hey everybody, it's Stephen Collins with Fort Worth Realty. One of the top questions I see being asked today is how to sell your home without a realtor. And in today's market, it's really fast paced, and a lot of sellers just think they can do it on their own. And what we see is a lot of sellers get halfway through the process, and there's a lot of things that go wrong in the transaction. So I figured I would take a few minutes for my educational video series this week and talk about how to sell your home without a realtor. Now, I know many of you are saying, well, why would you do that? It's going to take business away from you. Well, my job is to always make sure that the public is protected and understand the process of buying and selling a home. So I'm happy to go through the process with you and explain how to sell your home without a realtor in hopes that if anything does go wrong in the transaction, you're going to call me and let me help you. And if not, good luck. I hope the transaction goes smooth for you. At least this will give you an understanding of how to actually sell your home without a realtor. So let's dive right in. First, we're going to talk about the process. I'm going to move the camera up here a little bit because it's going to cause some problems on some other slides. So the process of selling your house is pretty straightforward. If you haven't bought a house before, sold a house, you probably haven't seen this. If you have, you kind of get a general idea of the process. So first thing you're going to do is prepare your home for the market. You're going to then market your home. You're going to make sure you have all the required disclosures. Once you have all the required disclosures, you're going to start scheduling showings. You'll negotiate the offers, do the inspections, request title work, request your HOA docs, make sure the appraisal gets done, then you'll schedule closing, do the final walkthrough, and then you'll close on your house. So we're going to take this down. We're going to break it down step by step so you understand what to do in each part of this process. So the first thing you're going to do is prepare your home for the market. You're going to do that by hiring a professional to come in and help you stage your home. When I say a professional, that could be a designer, anybody who's competent enough to know what today's trends are with placement of your home. The furniture and placement of your furniture in your house really helps tell the story of your home. So you really want to make sure that you have the furniture placed correctly. It's open where people can walk around, get around easily, and picture themselves in your home. The next thing you want to do is remove all your personal pictures. The reason you want to do this is you want the buyers to be able to picture themselves inside of your home. When you have personal pictures in there, they're going to focus on you as the homeowner and not them being in the home. You're going to want to declutter as much as possible. Remove all the large appliances from the counters. Make sure that you don't have books and toys thrown throughout the house. Just declutter, make it a nice, clean house. What you don't want to do is make your house look lived in. The reason for that is you want buyers to be able to see what their furniture, what their stuff's going to look like, not what your stuff looks like in the house. Go ahead and make a list of any upgrades that you've done to the house. Also remember that when you're doing your upgrades are not dollar for dollar when it comes to value. So just because you put $10,000 worth of blinds in the house doesn't mean you can raise the house by $10,000. On an appraisal, when we're looking at value of house, or when an appraiser is looking at value of house, they're looking at, do you have blinds or not? Now, yes, that helps your home sell faster, but it's not going to substantially increase the value of your house. So just keep that in mind. Also, as you're getting ready to put your house on the market, you want to lock up any of your personal documents. Make sure your guns and jewelry are not left out. As a realtor, guys, I can't tell you how many times we've walked into a house and a gun's been sitting in the closet. Make sure your items are locked up. We're going to talk more about this during the scheduling showings section, but you really want to make sure everything's locked up because unfortunately things can come up missing. You want to hire a professional photographer to take photos. Homes with a professional photographer sell 7% higher than homes without professional photos. This will be the first impression of your home. So make sure you're spending a little bit of money on those professional photos. Most of the time when you list with a realtor, we pay for the professional photos for you. But just make sure you're paying for professional photos. Professional photos cost anywhere from $150 to $500, especially if you're including like a virtual tour. I do virtual tours for free for all of my houses, but there's our additional cost that you want to do. Having a virtual tour is great because it allows buyers to see your house before they actually come in the door of your house. Now you want to gear up to market your home. First thing is you've got to price your home. Texas is a non-disclosure state. What that means is you as a homeowner, you can't see what the house down the street sold for. That's where it's very important that you're getting somebody to help run those numbers so you can see what the home down the street sold for, and then you can set your house for the best price. When you price your home too high, especially in today's market where buyers are offering substantially over list price, what you're going to do is take a lot of buyers out of the pool for your house, and you're not going to sell as high because you're not going to get into that bidding war. If you list your house too low, it also does the opposite effect. It shows potential buyers that there's problems with your house, and a lot of buyers are scared because the house is listed so low below market value. So it is very important that you get some kind of CMA done for your house so that you know what price you're looking at when you're listing. If you are about to sell your house on your own and you don't know the price, give me a call. I'll give you a free CMA. That will help you understand where to list your house at. Also, you're going to need to purchase for sale signs. You can buy those at the local hardware store. You can get them from Walmart. Get some for sale signs and place them in front of your house. Another good thing to do is get directional signs so you can put them at the main roads coming into your neighborhood. And this will help people come to your house and find your house, especially if it's further down in the neighborhood. You're going to want to list your home for sale on websites. This helps potential buyers find your home. Most houses sell off of the internet today. So if you're not listing them in a lot of places, you're not going to get that traction. A few good sites to list it for is Craigslist, Zillow, and Facebook. But let me caution you, there is a lot of fraud. A lot of for sale by homeowners will list their homes on these websites. And what happens is some scammers in other countries will get your pictures. They'll relist your house on the same site, offer it up for lease, and ask people to send them $1,000, $2,000 through wire. And they'll sign a lease with a person and have them move into your house, and you don't know anything about it. So there's a lot of scams when you use those websites. So just make sure that you're being careful. I would watermark all of your pictures you put out there to make sure that it says for sale so people know that it's not a lease listing when those photos are reused. Also, there's a lot of people that want to do harm. So when you list your house out there, they're going to schedule showings with you with the intent to defraud you in some way, shape, or form. So please make sure you're being careful to that. If you have any questions about the current scams that are going on or what we're seeing in the market, feel free to give me a call. I would love to talk to you about that. Zillow is where you're going to get the least amount of scam from because Zillow does some stuff to try to make sure for sale by owners are safe on their website. Just know, though, that us realtors, we use Zillow as marketing to for sale by owners. So a lot of times you're going to be bombarded with phone calls from realtors. So just keep that in mind when you list your house out there on the internet. When you list with a realtor, every other realtor is prohibited from calling you because they already have an agreement with you. So find your websites that you're going to list on. You'll need to create a flyer showcasing your home and the upgrades in your home. Make sure you know the relevant information about your neighborhood. You're going to need to know zoning information. You're going to need to know what's in your neighborhood. You're going to need to know rules in the city. People are going to ask you these questions. Make sure you know historical details about the home, when it was last sold before you, how many owners has it had. Know that information because you're going to be asked that when you put your house on the market. Excuse me. Another good thing to do is send out just listed postcards to your neighborhood. These cost about $500 to $800 when you do that. Most realtors do this service for free for you. When you send the just listed postcards out to your neighborhood, it's because your neighbors may know somebody who they want to move into that neighborhood. And when they know your house is on the market, they're going to actually work to help market your home to their friends. So send that out to them. Make sure you have a phone number that you can answer pretty much all hours of the day. Buyers will be calling you at all hours of the day. We're going to talk about the number of showings that are average in this market so you can see it when we get to the scheduled showings. But just know that you are going to get a lot of phone calls, so you need to be prepared for that and have a phone number that can be answered. You'll also need to go ahead and start finding your survey. Make sure you have that available. You're going to want to show potential buyers that. You're also going to need to sign a form T47, which is a form that just says you've made no changes to the survey since you have purchased the home. So that T47 is out there. If you need a copy of it, let me know. I can provide you a copy. It also has to be notarized. I am a notary republic for this specific reason. So I do help my clients notarize their T47 as needed. If you need me to help you sign it and notarize the T47, just let me know. If you don't have your survey, most of the time you can reach out to one of the realtors and we can call the title company and try to get it for you. Or you may have to order a new survey during the transaction. Surveys are about $500 to $600. I say this with a grain of salt because right now there is some legal precedence in the area that we may have to stop using surveys from previous sales. So you may have to order a new survey anyway. It's because surveyors are starting to copyright their surveys. So it's something to pay attention to when you're looking at your survey. See if it's copyrighted. If it is copyrighted, you're going to need a new survey no matter what. Keep in mind that the survey who's paying for that is negotiable during the transaction. So you can negotiate it. Historically, buyers have been willing to pay for that survey. So just keep that in mind when you're negotiating the offer. All right, so let's move over to some required disclosures. This is where I see a lot of sellers get into some issues. Texas has a lot of disclosures that you have to make to the seller or to the buyer prior to selling your house. So this does become a significant issue if you don't know what those disclosures are. The first one we're going to talk about is the Texas Property Code Section 5.008 requires that a seller provide a seller's disclosure notice to any potential buyers of the home. Now, for those of you who are watching the video may say, well, that's not true in all cases. And that's correct. There are some exceptions to the Texas Property Code. Like if the home's being sold as an estate, you don't need to provide the seller's disclosure notice. But for 99% of transactions, you will be required to provide that seller's disclosure notice to any potential buyers of the home. And this becomes important because if you accept an offer and you did not provide the seller's disclosure notice up front, the buyer has 7 days from the date that you provide the seller's disclosure notice to terminate the contract for any reason. What this means is you can be 3 weeks into the sale, forget to do the seller's disclosure notice. And now the buyer is backing out on day 20 because you just provided the seller's disclosure notice, and they have up to 7 days after the date it's provided to back out for any reason. So make sure you don't get in that loophole. Just have the seller's disclosure notice done up front. If you don't have a copy of it, give me a call. I'm happy to provide you a copy of it. All right, one of the newest ones that just came out is the Texas Water Code, Section 49.452. It states that the buyer must give notice if the property is in a multiple utility district or a public utility district prior to contracting to purchase a home. This requirement's always been out there, but what's happened now is the Texas Real Estate Commission has come up with a form that's specifically for this. And what happens is if you are in a multiple utility district, also referred to as a MUD, or a public utility district referred to as a PUD, if you do not provide the disclosure prior to accepting an offer on your home, that buyer now has the opportunity to terminate the contract at any point. So what this means is the day before closing, the day of closing, the buyer can say, I changed my mind. I'm not going through with the sale because you did not provide the disclosures that are required. So this is where it's very important that if you are in that MUD or that PUD, you have this disclosure available to buyers up front, and you make sure you do not sign a contract without them signing the MUD disclosure saying that you gave it to them. If your house was built before 1978, you're also required to provide the addendum regarding lead-based paint. So make sure you do that. That needs to be provided before the sale with the seller's disclosure notice. You also need to read the contract to make sure you're fully aware of what items are included in the contract and what aren't included in the contract. You'll need to make sure those items that you want to take with you are excluded from the sale. This is the number one thing we see come up for disputes. So I'm going to give you an example. One of the number one things we see are curtains and blinds. Curtains and blinds are included with the sale on the Texas contract if you use that. So if you do not exclude that, you cannot take the curtains and the blinds out of the house. They have to stay with the house. Another big one is TVs. If TVs are mounted to the wall, you have to exclude those in the contract or you have to leave them when you sell the house. So it's very important that you understand the contract and you properly exclude your items. If you have any questions about that, reach out to a realtor. We're always happy to help. I'm happy to help. My phone number is listed at the top. Give me a call. You are also required to disclose any material defects you know of that you are aware of. So, like if you just had a flood in your house and you did not fix behind the walls, you have to disclose that if you know about it. There's further disclosures if you have a septic or well system, so make sure you are looking into those and make sure that if you do have a septic or a well, you are providing those correct disclosures with the seller's disclosure notice. Again, if you have any questions about the required disclosures, reach out to us. We're happy to help. All right, let's talk about showings. Be prepared. You will receive calls at all hours of the day. When you start showing, if you're not using a realtor, you will have buyers come to your door at all hours of the day, knock on the door, and ask to see your house. Be prepared for that. Over here on the right, we have a snapshot of a house we just sold in Fort Worth. We had 57 showings in 2 days. So that should show you the number of showings you should expect to get if your house is properly priced and marketed correctly. 57 showings is a lot in 2 days. This was nonstop. We had nonstop showings from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. every day. Now, you've got to answer some questions. Are you going to allow showings without being present? We strongly recommend that you are not present during showings because if you are, there's a chance that you may say something or disclose something that could hurt your chances of negotiating in an offer, or it could be construed that you just said something in passing and now that results in a seller or buyer being upset about the information that was presented. But if you are present for the showing, what we say is just stand back, let the showing happen, and try to stay out of their way. However, if you're showing without realtors, you're going to have people walking around your house. So you need to make sure everything is locked up and that they can't take anything. You need to have a security plan for your showings. Unfortunately, there are people out there that are doing bad things. When you're showing with realtors, we have a process to make sure that the people we're showing are legitimate buyers and can buy a house. When you're doing it without a realtor, you're going to have people in your house that you don't even know if they can buy a house. So make sure you have a security plan. Make sure people know that you're showing your house. Make sure your friends and family know when you're having showings present. So if unfortunately something does happen, somebody's aware and can try to help you. We talked about, are you going to walk around the house with potential buyers? Again, we try to recommend that you don't do that because you don't want to inadvertently disclose incorrect information about your house that could lead to issues down the road. A lot of people use a lockbox. They'll go to Home Depot, they'll buy a lockbox, throw it on their house, and just allow showings to happen. Remember, again, you're allowing people into your house without a realtor. They may not be able to buy a house, and they may be up to bad things. So just make sure you're having a process for that. Also, this is the number one fraud in real estate right now with leases. What's happening is people are putting combination lock boxes on their house. A fraudulent person is getting the combination of that lockbox. They are then listing your house for lease on multiple websites. They're giving that lockbox code to people to go look at it. And when they go look at your house and agree to lease it, they're wiring money to the scammer. The scammer is then giving them the code to the lockbox and telling them to move in the house. Once they move in the house, it becomes some legal issues. You have to talk to an attorney. But it's not just as simple as telling them they have to leave. Once they've moved in and established residency, it is going to cause some problems. That is why, as realtors, we use realtor lock boxes that can only be opened by a realtor, and there is no combination keypad on it. You also need to be aware of how you're going to keep track of showings to make sure you know when showings are scheduled, so you inadvertently don't have somebody come to your house while you're getting dressed or doing something else. Are you going to request feedback? A lot of times when we request feedback, what we find out is that the buyer isn't interested in the house because it's something they didn't see during the walkthrough or something they missed. So when we ask for feedback, that gives us a chance to try to rectify that problem and still get that buyer to put an offer on the house. So I strongly encourage you to ask for feedback, have some kind of process to ask for feedback. Also, when you're talking to potential buyers, there's some things that you want to be very careful about disclosing if you don't know the factual information. A lot of times we see this where there's like a green belt behind the house, and we'll see sellers saying, well, that's a green belt, it can never be built on. And then a year after buying the house, what you see is the owner of that green belt, typically the HOA or the developer, decided to develop that property, and now there's houses. Well, you just told the potential buyer that that's not going to happen. So just make sure that you're being careful about those disclosures. Also, school boundaries change, annexations happen all the time. So you don't want to tell a potential buyer, hey, that school down the road is going to be where your kids are going to, and the lines get readjusted next year, and now they're no longer going to that school. So just be careful that you're not disclosing information that you shouldn't be to potential buyers. It's always best to stick with facts about the potential house and have the buyer verify any information that they ask about. This is also important when it comes to square footage. If you haven't measured your house, you don't know your square footage with the tax records are accurate. So you tell the buyers the tax record square footage. If they want to verify something else, they can verify that themselves. If you know it's wrong, you need to disclose that. But if you don't know it's wrong, you don't want to get in a situation over 5 or 10 square feet because you said it was correct and the tax records were all 5 or 10 square feet. So just be very careful when you're talking to potential buyers. That's where having a realtor comes in handy, because we don't allow those conversations to happen, and we kind of keep everybody apart so it doesn't happen. All right, let's talk about negotiating offers. So not every offer is the same. You may get 2 offers that are $60,000 above asking price, and one offer may close, and one offer you can tell right off the bat it's not going to close. So it's always important that you're looking at the full offer terms. What type of financing they're using? How much of a down payment are they putting down? Do they have the funds to cover their down payment? Do they have the funds to cover an appraisal waiver if they do an appraisal waiver? Because let's say that a seller or a buyer puts up $1,000 in earnest money. Well, if they back out in 2 months, you may or may not get to keep the earnest money. That's up to an attorney. But if they walk away with $1,000, or you walk away with $1,000, is that worth the time now that you've taken the house off the market? Because you didn't verify that they had the money to cover the appraisal gap, or they could pay for repairs, or have the financing to actually close the house. So it's always important that you look at the offers with a fine-tooth comb. Make sure you call the lender. Ask the lender, did you verify funds, or is this a pre-qualification letter? In another video, you'll see audio about the difference between a pre-qualification and a pre-approval. But basically, a pre-qualification just means, hey, I called the buyer, and the buyer said they qualified, so I'm writing that down. A pre-approval letter is a little bit different. That means the lender has actually verified that they do have money to close, and that they do have the assets and income that they said. So it is very important that you have that discussion with the lender and know the difference between a pre-approval and a pre-qualification letter. You also want to know what financing type there is. You'll hear different things from realtors where maybe a VA or FHA appraises lower than conventional. I will tell you that that is a myth among the real estate industry. They all appraise the same, but what we do see problems with is VA and FHA have additional safety requirements for the house that a conventional offer doesn't have. So depending on the condition of your house, the house may not go VA or FHA and may have to go conventional. So it just depends on what's wrong with your house and whether those offers are good. If you're in a newer house, taking a VA or FHA offer is a pretty safe bet. If you're in an older house that has some chip paint and has some holes in the wall, FHA and VA is not going to insure that house. You also want to know who's going to pay for the owner's title policy. This becomes a big deal because it also decides who the title company is. In Texas, historically, the seller has paid for the title policy. However, in the last few years, because the market's so hot, buyers are now offering to pay for the title policy to make their offer stronger. Well, under the RESPA rules, whoever pays for the owner's title policy gets to pick the title company. So just pay attention to that. If you have your title company you want to use, but the buyer is paying for the title company, or paying for the title policy, the buyer gets to choose the title company. If you're paying for the title policy, you get to pick the title company. If you don't have a clue of how to pick a title company, you're going to have to start calling some title companies and seeing if there's one you like. You also want to discuss about who's paying for repairs. You also want to know what's going to happen if the appraisal comes in low. Under the contract, if the house doesn't appraise for contract price, the buyer could potentially back out. Now you've lost all of that time because the appraisal doesn't happen until 2 or 3 weeks into the deal. If the buyer's waiving the appraisal, do they have the cash to do that? Also, if they're doing FHA and VA financing, they're not allowed to waive the appraisal up front. So these are all things you need to be aware of when you're writing the offer or when you're negotiating the offer. What plan do you have if the deal falls through? Right now in the DFW market, 73% of deals are going back on the market within the first 2 weeks because interest rates are going up, buyers are no longer qualifying for financing, and frankly, there just wasn't enough thought to the process on looking at these offers to make sure that the buyer could potentially buy the house. How much option and earnest money is on the table? So the option money gives the buyer the right to terminate the contract during a specified amount of days. This is the time they do the inspections and stuff. Historically, the option period was 7 to 10 days for $250, $350. Now what we're seeing is option days are 2 to 3 days, $500 to $1,000 in option money. So it's important to make sure you have option money. The buyer who puts $50 down for option money and wants a 10-day option period is less likely to get through that option period than a buyer who does a 3-day option period for $1,000. You also want to make sure that earnest money is on the table so that incentivizes the buyer to get through the transaction. Earnest money is about 1% of the purchase price. Keep in mind, earnest money can be refunded if the buyer backs out during the option period. It can be refunded if financing falls through within the financing window on the contract. They get their earnest money back if you didn't provide the right disclosures. So there's a lot of ways the buyer gets that earnest money back. So that's not as a big of a deal as the option money. The option money the buyer never gets back. So make sure that you're negotiating a good contract. All right, inspections. You have to allow the inspections once it goes under contract. So who's going to be present for the inspections and how will the inspector get in the house? I recommend as a seller that you are not present for the inspection. The reason for this is it hurts the inspector's ability to do their job when the seller's there pointing out all of the other stuff that the inspector's not really looking at. Also, if the inspector makes you aware of a material defect of the house that you didn't otherwise know before, you are now obligated to disclose that material defect to future buyers. So it's just best if you're not around the inspector and you just let the inspector do its thing. So you can put a lockbox. If you put a lockbox, now you're running the risk of if somebody gets that combination, they're putting your house out on scam sites. So just be very careful on that. It is okay practice if you unlock the door for the inspector and leave, or if you stay in one room, just stay out of the inspector's. Let the inspector do his job and try not to get in his way. Try not to ask questions. And don't worry about pointing things out. That's the inspector's job. You let the inspector deal with it. If an inspector asks you questions, tell him he needs to get with the realtor or the buyer. I would not directly answer questions to the inspector as a seller, because that could negatively affect the sale. The inspector's job is to be there and look through the house. All right. You got to request the title work. This is going to be done by the title company that you picked. Make sure earnest and option money was deposited. Has to be deposited within 3 days of the contract. We already talked about who picked the title company. Make sure you have the name of the title company and their contact information. Make sure you provide the title company with the contract as soon as it's executed. Make sure you get your mortgage information and send that over to the title company so that they can start requesting your payoff. They're going to need to know about any liens you have. So this is where you start working with the title company. You're also going to need to request HOA docs if you're in an HOA. This will generally be done by the title company, but they will require you to pay the resale cert fee prior to ordering those docs. Reason for that is if the deal falls apart, the title company doesn't want to be stuck with the $300 to $500 it costs to get the resale certificate issued. On the HOA docs, it will specify how much you pay in transfer fees and how much the buyer pays. So just pay attention to the HOA, the Addendum Concerning Mandatory Ownership Association, so you can know how much you're going to be expected to pay of those transfer fees and all of that. And you will pay the transfer fees at closing. It will just be taken out of your net proceeds. If you don't have any net proceeds, you will bring the additional money. You will need to be ready for the appraisal. The appraisal will be ordered by the lender, but you'll want to make sure the lender ordered the appraisal because sometimes they forget. You'll want to make sure that you will be available to allow the appraiser to access the home. The appraisal is in your house a few minutes. This is where you can answer questions to the appraiser. The appraiser was ordered by the lender, so you can be at the house for the appraisal. They'll only be there a few minutes. They shouldn't ask you any questions, but they may ask you questions about the water source or something else that they just need to fill out for the appraisal. Delaying the appraiser's access to the home can and will delay closing, so make sure that you allow your appraisal to come in the house. If the appraisal does not meet value, what are you going to do? If there's not an appraisal waiver, are you going to drop the price? Are you going to try to negotiate with the buyers to come up? Are you going to try to negotiate 50-50? Remember that if you do not have an appraisal waiver, the appraiser, depending on what terms are written into the contract, the buyers can terminate the contract and get their earnest money back. So it's very important that A, your house is priced correctly, and B, you deal with that kind of during the negotiations and know what's going to happen if the appraisal doesn't meet value. And this is when you will negotiate any appraisal issues. This is when you'll drop the price, raise the price. And this is usually a week or two before closing. So if you and the buyer can't come to term, now you're terminating the contract and having to put it back on the market into the process, so that you're losing a lot of time on selling your house. So it's really good that you understand how to handle the appraisal. You're then going to schedule closing. You want to make sure that the title company has issued your final closing disclosure. You also want to call the buyer and make sure they sign their final loan estimate 3 days before closing. I know this sounds like something that you shouldn't have to do, but if the buyer does not sign the loan estimate 3 days before closing, then they're not going to close on time, and now they're delaying closing and wasting your time. Call the title company, make sure your closing statement has been issued. Get that a day or two before closing. Make sure you review the closing statement for any errors. Every now and then there are errors. Sometimes things that were negotiated in the contract do not make the closing statement. So just make sure that you are getting the closing statement and negotiating that, and reviewing that, sorry. Make sure you send wiring instructions to title so they know where to wire your funds to if you are receiving funds. If you're wiring money to title, do not ever wire money to a title company or anybody without verifying the title instructions or the closing instructions are correct. Once you wire money, you can't get that back. And then you want to schedule closing about 2 to 3 days ahead of time. Next, you're going to do the final walkthrough. This is when you should be completely out of the house. The buyer is going to do the final walkthrough. This is going to make sure that the house is still in the same condition it was when they brought the house. There's no damages to the house, and that you did get everything out in accordance with the contract, and that you did not take anything on the contract that you weren't supposed to take. Buyer gets to do the walkthrough. This is where you will see the most issues come up right before closing. The seller took out the curtains and that they weren't supposed to. So this walkthrough has to happen. It will happen the day before closing or right before closing, the day of closing. You will need to allow the buyer to have access to the house for this walkthrough. All right, closing, you've made it. Now you're at the closing table. Couple of things to realize. In Texas, the buyer and the seller do not close at the same time. So you may close at 9 a.m. in the morning, the seller may not, or the buyer may not close until 4 p.m. Funding will not occur until the buyer and the seller have signed all documents, the lender has approved the documents, and the title company has received all funds. Once the title company receives all funds, they will wire any net proceeds to the seller or issue the check if the seller wants a check. Keep in mind, the buyer cannot take possession and shouldn't take possession of your home until funding has occurred, because at any point something could happen and you don't want the buyer to move in before funding has occurred. So they can't take possession, so don't give them the keys until possession, until funding. Once funding occurs, title will notify you and you will transfer the keys to the new buyer. And then you will be closed. So just keep in mind that, it is imperative that unless you have a seller's lease back or a buyer's lease back, possession does not occur until funding happens by both parties. Funding is not when you receive the money in your account. It may take another 24 hours for you to receive the money in your account. Funding is when the title company has received the money in their account. That is when the transaction has funded. All right, so some final thoughts. I hope you found this video informative. Not only did we explain the process of selling a home, but how to sell a home by yourself. If you've watched this video and you're like, oh, that's a lot of stuff, give me a call. I'd love to help you. If you want to tackle selling your house on your own, watch the video, give me a call. I'll give you some free advice. It's all good. I'll give you disclosures if you need them. You can call me anytime. My phone number is 682-777-8144. Not only am I a realtor, I'm also a mortgage loan originator. So if you need help with mortgage, let me know. I can help you with that. And you can visit my website at northfortworthhomesales.com. Just because I have Fort Worth in the name, don't let it fool you. I do serve the entire metroplex of DFW. So I do look forward to answering your questions and helping you with whatever you need. My goal as a realtor is to be there throughout your life and be the realtor of choice for anything you need. So if you ever need a CMA for taxes, you ever need a CMA because you're going to list your house on your own, you want to know where the disclosures are, give me a call. I'm there for you. It's been a pleasure having you watch this video. If you need anything at all, like I said, call me, email me. I'm here. Good luck to you. Look forward to talking to you.